The alien vessel drifted through the frigid void, its sensors pulsing rhythmically as waves of probing data swept across the human warship. The Varian scout crew had tracked humanity for decades, watching their wild wars, their relentless expansion, their refusal to yield to galactic authority. They'd seen the crude tools humans once used, projectile weapons, clunky energy beams, and nuclear blasts barely worthy of concern. To them, humanity had always been a primitive, reckless species, too volatile, too emotional to pose a real threat, until now. The readings from the human warship changed everything. "Hi, Captain," a bridge officer rasped, his spines folding, flat with dread. "You should see this." High Captain Zorth stepped forward, his yellow eyes narrowing as he studied the incoming data. What he saw chilled him to the core. The human vessel, designated Indomitable, was not a ship. It was a fortress, a brutal, weaponized leviathan that defied every known standard of warfare. Its hull was not constructed from ordinary alloys, but composed of exotic materials engineered to absorb and neutralize energy fire. The armor was impossibly thick, clearly designed to endure sieges that would crush lesser fleets. And the weapons, Zorth's throat constricted as he read the list. Indomitable was bristling with nightmarish firepower, railguns that hurled projectiles. At near-light speeds, plasma lances able to slice through starship armor like silk, and missile pods, thousands of them, loaded with warheads that bent space itself on detonation, unraveling shields and hulls with terrifying ease. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the true horror lay in the secondary systems. These weren't just tools of destruction. They were made to exterminate crews, boarding drones wielding monomolecular blades and viral AI hacks, swarms of nanites built to dissolve both flesh and circuitry, and the exotroopers, cybernetic. Nightmares born from fallen human warriors, retrofitted with enough destructive power to level cities. The Varian officer turned ghostly pale. "This isn't a warship, High Captain. It's a nightmare." Zorth could barely breathe. Humans had always fought like cornered predators, willing to do anything to survive, boundless, relentless. And now they had forged a machine that embodied their ruthless tenacity. It was horrifying. For years, the Galactic Union had debated whether to integrate or eliminate humanity. Most deemed them too chaotic to be worth the trouble. That had been a grave mistake. The humans had been preparing. Now they were ready. Zorth swallowed hard, issuing a quiet command. "Kill the scans, power down weapons, send word to the homeworld." "What do we tell them?" his officer asked. Zorth exhaled shakily. "Tell them we must never provoke the humans." Silence gripped the Varian bridge as High Captain Zorth stared at the behemoth looming in the void. Indomitable hovered motionless, silent, alert, watching. The crew obeyed immediately, shutting down all weapons, ending all scans. But it was already too late. The human vessel had noticed them. A ripple of energy shimmered across its hull. Before Zorth could react, a transmission slammed into their comms. The voice was cold, mechanical, unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel. You have scanned a Terran warship. State your purpose, now." The Varians froze. Their stealth systems were designed to hide them from all detection. No species had ever pierced their veil, but the humans had, and they were angry. Zorth's mind raced. A wrong word, a wrong move, and they'd be obliterated. He inhaled, steadying his nerves, and gestured to his comms officer. "Open a channel. Do not, under any circumstances, show hostility." A soft click. The line opened. "This is High Captain Zorth of the Royan Exploration Fleet," he began, voice level. "We mean no harm. We were only observing." Silence, then came the voice again, this time with something strange in it. Mockery. "Observing, huh? Thought we wouldn't notice? Thought that fancy cloaking tech made you invisible?" Zorth's stomach dropped. They'd been seen through completely. That was not our intention, he lied smoothly. We observe many species. Yours was of particular interest. Another pause. Then their sensors flared. Indomitable was powering up, engines burning unnaturally bright, weapon systems shifting to combat status. Dozens of targeting arrays locked onto the Varian ship. Every possible escape vector was covered. If the humans fired, there would be no survival. Then came the voice again. I suggest you find another species to spy on. A warning. And beneath it, a promise. Zorth clenched his jaw. He had misjudged them. The whole Union had. These weren't upstart primitives clawing for power. They were already there, and they were showing mercy. Understood, Zorth said carefully. We'll depart at once. A long beat. Then, at last, the human voice softened. Barely. Smart. Move. Now run along, little scout, and remember who rules this sector. The transmission ended. Zorth didn't hesitate. Get us out of here, now! The Varian ship pivoted sharply, its jump drive flaring as it vanished into the void. Stars blurred past in streaks of white and blue. Zorth released a long, trembling breath. Humanity wasn't just dangerous. They were something else entirely, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Varian scout ship dropped out of jump, light years from the terrifying shadow of Indomitable. High Captain Zorth had expected relief to wash over him, expected safety, but it never came. Instead, a cold weight pressed into his chest. His claws tapped the armrest of his command chair. Send an encrypted transmission to High Command, he ordered. They must be informed at once. The communications officer hesitated. Captain, what do we say? Zorth exhaled slowly. The truth. The humans are not what we believed. The message was encoded and dispatched in moments, and then they waited. The bridge remained quiet, tense. Crew members stole nervous glances at sensor arrays, as though Indomitable might reappear behind. Them at any moment, Zorth understood. This had been routine, a reconnaissance mission. The Galactic Union had ranked humanity as a low-tier power, curious, volatile, perhaps dangerous, but far from a true threat. An error, a disastrous one. Minutes dragged into hours. Then finally the reply came. Zorth read the order and felt a chill in his blood. Report to the War Council. All further operations suspended. Humanity must be re-evaluated. The War Council only convened in the face of existential threats. The last time had been during the UR hive crisis, a parasitic species that devoured entire systems before the Union annihilated them. Now, humanity was being treated the same. Prepare the next. Jump, Zorth said. We returned to Zoltarath. As the ship powered up, he gave the void one final glance. For generations, the Royan believed themselves unrivaled, masters of strategy and superior intellect. But now, Zorth felt like prey, and he knew humanity had become the apex predator of the galaxy. And worse, they hadn't even shown their full strength. Zoltarath, the Varian capital world, gleamed under twin suns as Zorth's ship descended toward the military command complex. Jagged spires of black steel rose high, each adorned with the crimson banners of the War Council, symbols of unyielding control and supreme order. An audience with them was a rarity, granted only to the highest warlords of the Dominion. That he, a mere scout commander, had been summoned only meant one thing: fear. Zorth stepped off the ramp, his boots echoing against the polished onyx floor. Flanked by honor guards, he marched through narrow corridors to the looming council doors. They beam. Opened, inside stood the 13 warlords who governed the Royan Dominion. At their center, Grand Warlord Torval, his face a roadmap of ancient battles, eyes gold and unblinking. You've seen something, Torval said, voice like grinding metal. Something that's shaken even you. Zorth approached, his claws locked tightly behind him. I have, Grand Warlord. And the news I bring is grim. He activated a hollow projector. The terrifying scan of Indomitable filled the chamber. As the data scrolled, discomfort rippled through the gathered leaders. "This is a human warship," Zorth said. "A single vessel, but it carries armor that neutralizes energy attacks, kinetic weaponry that bypasses shields, and boarding tech designed to eliminate entire crews before destroying their ships." Gasps, murmurs, faces hardened. Warlord Veer scoffed, his reputation carved in blood from campaigns against primitive species. "Absurd. Humanity is young. Their tech is crude. Even if improved, they lack strategic acumen to threaten us." Zorth turned his gaze on him. "Then tell me, Warlord, how did they detect us through cloaking fields no other species has ever penetrated? How did they lock onto our ship before we even knew they'd noticed us?" Veer hesitated. Zorth pressed on. "They didn't fire, they let us leave. And do you know what that means?" Torvald's face darkened. "That they are not mindless savages." Zorth nodded. "Exactly. They are disciplined. They knew they could annihilate us, and they chose restraint. That patience is what makes them terrifying, because it means they're preparing." A silence settled across the chamber, heavy as death. For the first time in Varian history, a War Council meeting ended with no decision, no mobilization, no declaration, because for the first time the Dominion faced an enemy they couldn't define, and the humans they already knew. The council chamber emptied slowly, the unease thick in the air. Zorth lingered beside the war table, claws resting on the smooth metal. Torvald remained too, silent. His golden eyes stared at the frozen image of Indomitable. Then finally a breath escaped the warlord's nostrils. "You believe they're preparing for war?" Zorth stood straighter. "No, Grand Warlord, I believe they're preparing for something worse." Torvald's gaze sharpened like a drawn blade. "Explain." Zorth tapped the projector. The image shifted, zooming on Indomitable's power core. The energy signatures pulsed irregularly, unnaturally. "This ship wasn't just designed for battle," Zorth said. "It was made to endure. That armor, it's for withstanding immense sustained damage. The redundant power grids, the weapon density, every feature points to a terrifying truth." Torvald's voice dropped. "They expect an enemy greater than us." Zorth nodded slowly. "Yes, and they're preparing to face it." The warlord remained. Still, then he spoke. "Begin deep intelligence sweeps across all human space. I want everything, intercepts, movements, rumors." His gaze fixed on Zorth. "And you have a new mission." Zorth stiffened. "As you command." Torvald leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Find out what they're afraid of." Aboard Indomitable, deep in Terran-controlled space, Captain Elias Grant stood in silence. Sensor logs played across his screen, the encounter with the Varian scout, replayed from every angle. His officers murmured uneasily, wondering why the alien ship had been allowed to escape. Grant knew. He folded his arms, eyes narrowing as he studied the residual energy signature left by the Royan vessel. "They're starting to ask questions," his XO said quietly. Grant nodded. "Let them." The officer hesitated. "Do you think they suspect?" Grant exhaled slowly. His gaze shifted to the encrypted files on his console. Classified reports, decades old, locked behind a dozen clearances, reports of the real threat. Reports the galaxy had never seen. He turned to the viewport, watching stars drift in endless silence. They'll find out soon enough. Zorth sat alone in his chamber aboard Sovereign Wrath, his eyes scanning data feeds, fed directly from War Council intelligence. The fear in him deepened. He'd been granted full access. Everything known about humanity. What he read chilled him. More than anything he'd faced in his career. Over the last 50 years, human tech hadn't just advanced, it had leapt forward unnaturally. From crude planetary defense grids to warships that outclassed most galactic Union fleets, their designs were refined, precise, deadly. But it wasn't their tech that disturbed him most. It was the pattern. Every known spacefaring species followed. The same expansion arc: spread, conquer, grow, repeat. But the humans, they weren't expanding. They were building fleets, fortresses, shipyards, turning out war vessels at a rate that defied reason. But they didn't take territory. They didn't push borders. They didn't claim new systems. They were waiting. Zorth stared at the screen, claws tapping a slow rhythm against the console, and he knew something was coming, and the humans were getting ready. If humanity was preparing for war, it should have been against the Rians, or perhaps another dominant species within the Galactic Union. But if they had no interest in conquering their neighbors, then the question loomed: who were they preparing? For Zorth's console chimed, an encrypted priority feed from the Royan intelligence network. Frowning, he opened the file. Seconds later, a chill ran through him. It was a deep space scan from a sector far beyond any human territory, an area long marked as lifeless, uninhabited for millennia. Only now, it wasn't empty. The images showed wreckage, not human, not Varian, not of any known species. Massive hull fragments drifted across the void, remnants of ships so enormous they dwarfed even the largest constructs in galactic records. Their design was utterly alien, jagged, twisted. They bore marks of violence, but not from standard weapons. Something had torn these vessels apart, and that wasn't the worst part. Amid the shattered debris, faint signals pulsed, weak, erratic, but undeniably active. Energy emissions, life, motion, whatever had annihilated those ships, was still out there, and the humans already knew. Zorth's fists clenched. Indomitable wasn't a warship built to fight the Union. It was built to fight them, and suddenly, Zorth understood why he'd been allowed to live. It wasn't a show of dominance. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The only question now was, had the warning come too late? Zorth's stomach twisted as he skimmed through the intelligence files. His claws tapped an anxious rhythm against the console. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a graveyard. An ancient war had raged out there, beyond explored space, and something had survived it. The humans had always known. He exhaled slowly, trying. To quiet the primal fear rising in his chest, he needed proof. And that meant one thing: he had to speak to the humans. Deep within Terran space, aboard the warship Indomitable, Captain Elias Grant stood beneath the dim blue lights of the bridge. His eyes fixed on the tactical map. Officers moved with practiced precision, checking diagnostics and watching the outer sensor grid. But Grant's attention was locked on a single anomaly. A lone Royan ship had entered Terran space. No escorts. No armed systems, no signs of aggression. Brave, his first officer muttered, arms crossed. Or desperate, Grant smirked. Maybe both. He leaned forward. Open a channel. Moments later, the view screen lit up. Zorth's reptilian visage stared back, tension clear in the lines of his jaw and the flicker of his yellow eyes. Captain Grant, he said, voice even. We need to talk. Grant tilted his head. Do we? Zorth didn't waver. I've seen the wreckage. I know why you're building these ships. I know what you're preparing for. His claws tapped the edge of his console. And I know you've kept it hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The bridge fell silent. Grant rubbed his jaw, then gestured to mute the outgoing channel. Well, his XO whispered, there goes the secret. Grant nodded slowly. The Royan was sharper than expected, faster than he'd planned for. That would complicate things, because the truth was, humanity hadn't just found the wreckage. They'd met the monsters that caused it, and they knew, eventually, that war would come for them. All of it. The military surge, the stagnant borders, the production of ships like Indomitable wasn't about conquest. It was about survival. Grant unmuted the feed and met Zorth's gaze. "You want answers?" he said. "Fine. But once I tell you there's no turning back." Zorth nodded slowly. "I understand." Grant exhaled. "All right then, let me tell you about the things in the dark." Grant sat in the subdued glow of his command chamber, encrypted files projected across his desk in eerie blue light. The reports contained information no non-human had ever seen. Until now. Zorth sat opposite, still and unreadable. But Grant could see the tightness in his posture, the unspoken tension behind his eyes. The Royan had lived his life believing his people were the dominant hunters of the stars. That illusion was about to be obliterated. "We first detected strange signals about 80 years ago," Grant began, fingers laced. "Way out on the edge of explored space. At first we thought it was just noise, stellar background interference." He paused. Then ships started vanishing. Zorth's eyes narrowed. "Pirates," Grant shook his head. "That's what we assumed, until we found the wrecks." He tapped a command. The projector flickered, revealing grainy images, mangled ships adrift in the dark. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, massive scars. Some looked like energy strikes, others didn't. "Some ships were torn apart from the inside," Grant continued. "Others were peeled open, like fruit." Zorth's spines flattened in. "Instinctual alarm. This wasn't war," he said quietly. "This was extermination," Grant nodded. "We sent scouts. The first teams never came back. The ones that did—" His voice darkened. "They came back different." The footage shifted again. Body cam feeds from exploration teams. Flickering, chaotic. Screams echoed, muffled gunfire. And then, just before the feed cut, a scream, not human, not anything Zorth had ever heard. "What did you find?" he asked, barely whispering. Grant let out a breath. "At first, we thought it was ancient, dead, some long-forgotten war, but then—" He hesitated. Then they woke up. The next video was worse. A long-range surveillance recording. A human patrol fleet had come across a derelict floating in the wreckage. At first it seemed inert. Then it moved. Zorth watched, transfixed, as the massive structure came alive. Shifting plates, some metal, some organic, unfolded like monstrous limbs. It pulsed with alien energy. Dozens of appendages emerged, bristling with weapons or claws. Inside the ship's torn hull, shapes moved, twisted figures, elongated bodies, wearing scraps of alien uniforms. Some still bore armor, relics of long-dead civilizations. Then came the attack. The feed became chaos. The human fleet opened fire. But the thing, the entity, was unlike anything Zorth had seen. Energy beams bent around it, kinetic shells disintegrated before impact, and when it retaliated, the damage was unspeakable. Human ships didn't explode, they withered, metal decayed, hulls twisted inward. Crew members screamed as life support turned on them. Then, silence. Zorth stared, horror dawning in his eyes. "You survived," he said, voice shaking. "Barely," Grant replied. He rubbed his eyes. "We lost an entire fleet just to escape." He met Zorth's stare. "We call them the Erebus. We don't know what they call themselves. Hell, we don't know if they have names." Zorth exhaled, slow, controlled. "And you've been fighting them ever since?" Grant nodded grimly. "Not just fighting, preparing." His jaw clenched. "We don't know how many are out there. We don't know if they have a homeworld or if they're just out there, feeding. But we know one thing." He leaned in. "They're coming." Zorth sat in stunned silence, his mind spinning with what he'd just seen, what he'd just learned. Erebus, a name without meaning, yet heavy with dread. He had believed the Royan Dominion to be the pinnacle of power in the galaxy, that they dictated the fate of lesser civilizations. Now he saw the truth. They were all blind, all unprepared. The room was still, save for the quiet hum of indomitable systems. Grant studied him, measured his expression. Finally, Zorth found his voice. "You should have told the Galactic Union." His tone was low, controlled. "They deserved to know." Grant let out a humorless laugh. "And what would they have done, Captain?" "Dismissed us, called us paranoid, accused us of trying to start a war." He leaned forward, voice cold. "Or worse, they'd have panicked." Zorth opened his mouth to argue, but the words didn't come, because Grant was right. The Galactic Union was ancient, bureaucratic, slow. Major decisions took decades, centuries, endless politics, petty rivalries. If humanity had revealed the Erebus too soon, the Union would have either ignored them or sent fleets charging into the dark, unaware, unready, and by then it would be far, far too late. They were fighting. Both paths, revealing the truth too early or remaining silent, would have ended in ruin. Zorth exhaled sharply. "So, instead, you prepared in secret?" Grant nodded. "We built warships like Indomitable. We stopped expanding, started fortifying. Every colony became a stronghold, every outpost a forward defense station." His expression darkened. "Because we don't know when the Erebus will arrive in full, only that they will." Zorth's claws curled against the edge of the table. The Royan Dominion had always taken pride in their military might, but against this, an enemy that adapted in real time, that consumed both technology and biology. They wouldn't last a month, none of them would. A chilling thought surfaced. "Have the Erebus reached your inner worlds yet?" Grant said nothing. The silence was answer. "Enough." Zorth felt his blood run cold. "How long do you have?" Grant rubbed his temples, his voice dropped low. "If our projections are right, maybe a decade, maybe less. A decade. 10 years before the skies burned." Zorth straightened, his mind already racing. If he returned with this knowledge, the War Council would have to listen. They must. If they didn't, it would be suicide. But even that wouldn't be enough. The Dominion couldn't face this alone. The entire Galactic Union had to be warned. Every species, every soldier, every ship. He met Grant's gaze. "You let me go before, Captain." That was a warning, a show of strength. He inhaled deeply. "Now I'm asking you to let me go again. But this time, so I can fight." Grant studied him, long and hard, then nodded. "Then you'd better move fast, Captain," he said, "because time is running out." As the Varian ship left Terran space, Zorth sat quietly in his command chair, eyes fixed on the stars. He'd come seeking intelligence. Instead, he'd found a nightmare, and now the greatest war in galactic history was about to begin. Not between empires, not between rival species, but between life and the thing that had come to erase it. His vessel surged through the void, heading straight for the heart of the Dominion. There was no time to spare. Every second spent debating, every heartbeat of hesitation brought the Erebus closer. He had to make the War Council see, make them believe. But even as stars streaked past the viewport, doubt gnawed at his gut. Would they listen? Would the Dominion, proud, stubborn, accept that they were no longer the apex predator, that the war they'd spent centuries preparing for against humanity was meaningless now? Zorth clenched his jaw. It doesn't matter. If they wouldn't believe, he would make them, because the alternative was unthinkable. 1 week later, in the War Council chamber of the Royan Dominion, Zorth stood before the gathered warlords. His claws pressed against the Cold War table. The chamber crackled with tension. Suspicion hung thick in the air. At the head, Grand Warlord Taval studied the intelligence reports, silent and unreadable. Around him, the other warlords whispered, doubtful and on edge. Then Vir, the Dominion's most militant voice, snorted. This is madness, he growled. You expect us to believe the humans have been waging war in secret, that an unknown force waits beyond our borders to consume the galaxy. His spines bristled. Humans lie, Zorth. They manipulate. This is fear-mongering. Zorth's patience snapped. He slammed his fist on the table, baring his fangs. You think I'm afraid of humans, he snarled. I saw what they saw, heard the screams, watched ships torn apart like dry leaves, crews consumed by something we can't even comprehend. He jabbed a claw toward the flickering hollow projection. Look at it. That is not human deception. That is death. The room fell into a stunned silence. Taval leaned forward. And you trust the humans? Zorth hesitated. I trust that they want to live. He met the warlord's golden gaze. And right now, that's all that matters. Taval leaned back, unreadable. He inhaled deeply. You've given us much. To consider, High Captain. He glanced around the chamber. The council will deliberate. Zorth cut him off. There is no time for deliberation. The chamber stilled. Every eye turned to him. This enemy does not negotiate. It does not maneuver. It doesn't play politics. His voice dropped, tight with conviction. It devours. And once it arrives, there are no second chances. Taval stared at him. Then slowly, finally, he stood. I will summon the full might of the Dominion, he declared. His gaze swept across the room. And we will bring this before the Galactic Union if the humans speak truth. His voice grew grim. Then we all stand at the edge of extinction. His voice became steel, and we will not die in silence. Zorth exhaled, tension draining from his body. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning. 5 years later. High orbit, Royan Prime. The combined armada of the Galactic Union hung like a steel storm in space. Thousands of warships, human, Royan, Zori, Talari, aligned across the void, each with their own colors, their own histories, their own bloodshed. But now, for the first time, they stood united. At the center of it all loomed Indomitable, no longer alone. Dozens of her kind now existed. New dreadnoughts, built with shared technology, forged in alliance. The humans had opened their vaults. The Dominion had adapted their tactics, and the Union had built a wall of firepower the galaxy had never seen before, but no one knew if it would be enough. On the bridge of his new command ship, Zorth stood beside Captain Grant. Both stared into the black nothing beyond the fleet. Grant's voice was calm, but the tension in it was unmistakable. They're coming, Zorth nodded. Then we'll meet them. A long silence stretched. Then the stars shifted. A ripple spread across the void, darkness folding in on itself. And then the shadows moved. They came like nightmares given form. Ships, things, entities, twisting, pulsing. Their forms fused with ancient bones and alien hulls, organic, mechanical, malignant, adorned with the skeletal remains of their victims. The Erebus had arrived, and the war for the galaxy had begun.